A man stands on a beach on the morning of August 18, 1590. He's been trying to reach this beach for 3 years. He's begged for ships. He's been refused. He has been trapped by a war, blocked by a queen, robbed by pirates, and battered by storms. He has crossed the Atlantic twice, been stranded in the Caribbean for months, and nearly drowned in the surf, trying to reach the shore. He's standing on this beach because his daughter is there. His granddaughter is there. 113 other people are here. The community he promised to protect. The colony he swore to supply. The families he left behind 3 years ago with a promise that he would return within months. Today is his granddaughter's 3rd birthday. Her name is Virginia Dare. She was 9 days old when he last held her. She is 3 years old now, and he has never seen her walk, never heard her speak. He has imagined this reunion every single day for 1,096 days. He walks from the beach towards the settlement. The path is overgrown. The trees are silent. There's no voices, no children, no smoke from a fire, no dogs, nothing. He reaches the settlement and finds an empty field. The houses have been taken apart. The buildings are gone. The people are gone. 115 men and women and children have vanished from the face of the earth. There is no blood, no bones, no sign of a fight. There's only silence and a single word carved into a wooden post at the entrance to the abandoned fort. CROATOAN. His name is John White. He's the governor of what history will call the Lost Colony of Roanoke, and the word carved into that post will become the most famous unsolved clue in American history. 115 people gone. No bodies, no graves, no explanation, just a word. Tonight, I'm going to tell you what happened before that word was even carved. The full story, the betrayals, the violence, the impossible choices, and a 3-year nightmare that kept a grandfather from his family. Because the story of Roanoke is not just a mystery. It is the story of what happens when the people who promise to come back don't. But before we continue, the Midnight Archives exist for one reason, and that's to find the stories they buried, the ones too dark to be told during the day. They buried this one for a reason, and now we're going to dig it up. If that's what you're here for, hit subscribe and like this video, and I'll keep the candle lit. Now, let's go back to the beginning, before the families, before the baby, before any of them set foot on that island, because the ground they were sent to had already been poisoned, and that poison was English. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. Chapter 1. The Poisoned Ground. Before the Lost Colony, there was a first colony, a military expedition sent to build a fort and find gold. They found neither. What they left behind was worse than failure. They left behind a reason for the people who lived there to hate every English person who would ever set foot on that shore again. In the spring of 1584, 2 English ships land on the coast of what is now North Carolina. The captains are Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow, sent by Sir Walter Raleigh, one of the most ambitious men at the court of Queen Elizabeth I. Their mission is reconnaissance. They are to scout the coastline, assess the land, and make contact with whatever people they find there. They are the first English eyes on this part of the New World. What they find is extraordinary. The coast is a long chain of narrow barrier islands, the outer banks sheltering a vast network of sounds and estuaries behind them. The islands are covered in dense forest. The air, according to Barlow's report, smells so sweet, it is as if we had been in the midst of some delicate garden. The waters teem with fish. The forests are full of game. Grapevines grow so thick they cover the trees. To Englishmen from a cramped, over-farmed island, it looks like paradise, and the people they encounter seem to confirm it. A delegation from the local CROATOAN tribe approaches them with cautious curiosity. There is no interpreter, so communication happens through gestures, gifts, and the slow, careful body language of two peoples meeting for the first time. The English offer a hat and a shirt. The natives offer fish. There is no hostility. There is something close to wonder. A more significant meeting follows. Granddaughter, the brother of the regional chief, arrives with 40 or 50 men, all unarmed. He boards the English ship. They share wine and meat. A trade begins. Tin plates and metal tools exchanged for deerskins and hides. The relationship is, at this early stage, one of genuine goodwill. When the English prepare to sail home, they bring two things that will shape everything that follows. The first is a glowing report of the land, which Raleigh will use to convince investors and the Queen that Virginia, as he has named it, is worth colonizing. The second is two native men who have agreed to make the journey to England. Their names are Manteo and Wanchese. They are from different tribes. Manteo is from the CROATOAN people who live on a nearby island. He is open, curious, eager to learn the English language and to understand these strange newcomers. Wanchese is from the Roanoke tribe on the mainland. He is quieter, more watchful. He observes the English with the careful attention of a man who is not yet sure whether these people are friends or something else entirely. They spend roughly a year in England. They learn the language. They are presented at court. They see the cities, the ships, the armies. They see the scale of what England is, and they draw different conclusions. Manteo sees allies, powerful friends whose technology and weapons could benefit his people. Wanchese sees something else. He sees a civilization with the power and the appetite to take whatever it wants. He goes home with a warning forming in his mind. In the spring of 1585, a second, much larger expedition sails for Virginia. This is not a reconnaissance mission. This is a military operation. 7 ships carrying over 500 men, the majority of them soldiers. Their mission is to establish a permanent fortified base, a staging point for raids on Spanish treasure ships, and a foothold for the English Empire in the New World. The expedition is commanded by Sir Richard Grenville, Raleigh's cousin. The man he leaves in charge of the settlement is Ralph Lane, a veteran of England's campaigns to suppress the Irish. Lane is a soldier. He thinks like a soldier. He views the world through the lens of a military commander, dividing people into categories: useful, hostile, or irrelevant. This mindset will destroy everything. The trouble starts almost immediately. During a visit to the native village of Aquascogoc, a small silver cup goes missing. It is a trivial object. Among the English, it would be worth very little. But to Lane and Grenville, the theft is an insult, a challenge to English authority, and the response must be proportional not to the value of the cup, but to the message it sends. Grenville orders the village burned. The entire village, the houses, the food stores, the cornfields, which represent months of careful cultivation, and the village's primary food supply for the coming winter, all of it put to the torch because of a missing cup. To the English, this is discipline, a lesson, a demonstration of what happens when you take something that belongs to the crown. To the CROATOAN people, it is an act of war. The fragile trust that Armadas and Barlow had built over weeks of careful, respectful contact is destroyed in a single afternoon, and the English don't even understand what they've done. They sail away from the burning village, satisfied that they have established order. They have established something, but it is not order. It is hatred. Grenville returns to England, leaving Lane and roughly 107 soldiers on Roanoke Island. They build a small earthen fort on the northern end of the island. They plant the flag, and they settle in for the winter. They do not plant crops. This is worth pausing on, because it tells you everything about what kind of colony this is. 107 men on an island with finite supplies, and they do not plant crops. They are soldiers, not farmers. They are looking for gold. They are exploring for a deep water harbour.
They are mapping the rivers and testing the soil for mineral deposits and sending scouting parties inland to find the riches that will justify the expense of the entire enterprise. They are doing the things soldiers do. They are not doing the one thing that would keep them alive. The supplies they brought from England are calculated for a few months, after which Grenville's supply ships are expected to return with fresh provisions. The plan assumes everything will go according to schedule. The plan does not account for storms, for delays, for the fundamental unpredictability of a 3,000-mile supply chain in the 16th century. When the imported food begins to run low, Lane turns to the one available source, the native peoples. At first, the arrangement functions. The paramount chief of the region, a man named Wingina, provides corn and fish to the English. Wingina is not doing this out of generosity. He is doing it because the English have muskets and steel and the kind of military technology that could be useful in his own regional conflicts. The exchange is transactional. The English get food. Wingina gets access to powerful allies. Both sides are calculating. Both sides think they are getting the better deal. But the arithmetic doesn't work. The English garrison of 107 men consumes food at a rate the local agriculture was never designed to support. The native villages grow crops for their own people, with some surplus for trade and for lean years. They do not grow crops to feed 100 foreign soldiers who have arrived uninvited and show no sign of leaving. As autumn turns to winter, the demands increase and the supply decreases. Lane sends soldiers to the villages, not diplomats. Soldiers, armed men, arriving at native communities with an implicit message that is becoming less implicit by the week. Give us food, or there will be consequences. The villagers comply because they have seen what happened to Aquascogok. They have seen what English consequences look like. But compliance breeds resentment, and resentment breeds distance. The villagers begin to pull back. Families move further from the English fort. Gardens are planted in locations the English don't know about. Fishing camps are relocated to waters the English haven't mapped. Slowly, carefully, the native population begins to disentangle itself from the English presence, not through confrontation, but through withdrawal. Wanchese, the native man who travelled to England and returned with a warning, is now among his people. He has seen London, he has seen the Tower, he has seen the ships and the armies and the scale of English civilization, and he has seen, in that scale, what the English are capable of and what they will eventually want. He tells his people, these men are not visitors, they will not leave, and if we continue to feed them, we are feeding the thing that will consume us. The withdrawal accelerates. By the spring of 1586, the native villages around Roanoke have largely ceased contact with the English. The food supply has dried up. The soldiers are hungry, then starving. The expedition that was supposed to find gold and glory has found nothing except its own dependence on people it has alienated. And Lane is losing control. His men are weakening. Their discipline is fraying. The daily reality of hunger, of cold, of isolation on a small island surrounded by people who hate them is grinding them down. Lane needs someone to blame. He needs an enemy, because enemies are what soldiers understand, and enemies justify the use of force, and force is the only tool Lane has. He finds his enemy in Wingina. Wingina has changed his name to Pemisapan. The name change is significant in native culture, often marking a new phase of life or a new purpose. Lane interprets it as evidence of conspiracy. A man who changes his name is a man who is becoming something different, something hostile. Lane becomes convinced that Pemisapan is secretly uniting the surrounding tribes for a coordinated attack on the English fort. The evidence for this conspiracy is thin. Lane's own accounts describe rumours, suspicions and interpretations of native behaviour that could just as easily reflect exhaustion and resentment as military planning. But Lane is not interested in alternative explanations. He has decided that the natives are his enemy, and he acts accordingly. In the spring of 1586, Lane sends a message to Pemisapan, inviting him and his advisors to a meeting, a parley, a peace conference. The message promises negotiation. It promises a new beginning. It promises the very thing that the native peoples have been hoping for since the English arrived: a respectful conversation between equals about how to share this land. The message is a lie. Permisapan arrives with his delegation. They are unarmed, as is customary for a parley. They have come in good faith. They have come because, despite everything, despite the burned village and the stolen food, and the armed soldiers who show up at their doors demanding corn, they still believe that words can resolve what violence has created. When the delegation enters the meeting area, Lane gives a prearranged signal. The accounts record the words he uses: Christ, our victory. At the signal, his soldiers open fire. Muskets crack. The sound shatters the morning. The native leaders, standing in a loose group expecting to be greeted, are hit from multiple directions at once. Some fall immediately. Others stagger, wounded, confused, trying to understand how a peace conference has turned into a killing ground. Permisapan is hit, but he does not fall. He is a strong man, a chief, a man who has survived the politics of his own region for years. He runs. Wounded, bleeding, he breaks through the chaos and sprints into the woods. Lane sends soldiers after him. They track him by the blood trail. They find him in the underbrush, weakened by his wound, unable to run further. They kill him, and they bring back his head. Lane returns to the fort with the severed head of the man who had been feeding his soldiers for months. He displays it. He treats it as evidence of a victory. In his report, he describes the operation as a preemptive strike against a confirmed conspiracy. He presents himself as a commander who acted decisively to neutralize a threat. The native peoples see something different. They see a man who was invited to talk and was murdered. They see a head displayed as a trophy. They see the true face of the English, revealed not through their words, but through their actions. And the face is treacherous and violent and without honor. The colony is now completely isolated. The surrounding tribes have cut all contact. There is no food. The soldiers are reduced to digging roots and boiling leather straps for sustenance. The military base that was supposed to project English power has become a prison. Salvation arrives by accident. In June 1586, Sir Francis Drake appears offshore, returning from a devastating raid on the Spanish Caribbean. Drake is the most famous English seaman alive. He has circumnavigated the globe. He has plundered the Spanish Main. He has sacked Santo Domingo and Cartagena. He has just burned the Spanish settlement at St. Augustine in Florida. And now, on his way home, his ships laden with treasure, he makes a detour to check on Raleigh's colony. What he finds shocks him. Instead of a thriving English settlement, he finds a starving garrison of hollow-eyed soldiers living in an earthen fort, surrounded by a hostile population, their food gone, their morale destroyed. Drake, a patriot and a man of action, immediately offers assistance. He will give Lane a fully provisioned ship, the Francis. He will provide supplies, food, weapons. He will even leave some of his own men behind to bolster the garrison. The offer is generous beyond anything Lane could have hoped for. For a brief moment, it seems like the colony might survive. The supplies are being transferred. The Francis is being prepared. Lane's soldiers, for the first time in months, can see a path forward. And then the hurricane hits. The storm descends on the Outer Banks with a fury that nobody in the fleet has ever experienced. For 3 days, the wind screams across the barrier islands at speeds that strip the leaves from the trees and drive the rain horizontally. The sea rises. Enormous waves crash over the shallow sandbars, turning the sounds into a churning chaos of brown water and debris. Drake's great warships, anchored offshore, are tossed like toys. Anchor cables snap. Ships drag across the seabed and collide with each other in the dark. Smaller vessels are lifted by the waves and thrown onto the beach. The Francis, the ship that was supposed to save the colony, is torn from her moorings. Her anchor cable snaps and she is driven out to sea by the wind, carried away into the Atlantic, still loaded with the supplies intended for Lane's men. She is never seen again. The smaller boats that Drake had offered are smashed against the shore or swallowed by the waves. When the storm passes, the beach is littered with wreckage. The supply ship is gone. The provisions are gone. The boats are gone. Everything that Drake had offered, the entire lifeline, has been destroyed in 3 days of wind and rain. For the starving, demoralized soldiers at Fort Raleigh, it is the final straw. The hurricane has taken not just their supplies, but their will. They have endured a winter of hunger, a spring of violence, and now a force of nature has personally intervened to ensure their destruction. The universe itself appears to be telling them to leave. They abandon the fort. They scramble aboard Drake's ships, desperate, panicked, leaving behind equipment, records, and the priceless watercolor paintings of John White. And they sail home to England, leaving behind nothing but empty buildings, a legacy of violence, and one very important thing that nobody thinks about in the rush to leave: the memory. The native peoples remember everything. They remember the burned village. They remember the stolen food. They remember the parley that was a trap. They remember the head of their chief, carried back to the English fort like a trophy. The ground is poisoned, and the next English people to set foot on it will not be soldiers. They will be families. Chapter 2. The Families. After the soldiers failed, Raleigh tried something different. He sent women and children, farmers and craftsmen, not an army, but a community. 115 people sent to build a permanent home on a shore that was already stained with English blood. And at the center of the whole thing was a grandfather who brought his pregnant daughter. Sir Walter Raleigh is facing ruin. He has poured a fortune into the Virginia enterprise and has nothing to show for it except 100 soldiers with dysentery and a bill that would bankrupt a lesser man. His rivals at court are circling. His patent, the Royal Charter granting him the right to colonize, has an expiration date. If he cannot establish a viable permanent English settlement in Virginia within the next few years, his claim to the territory expires and his dream of an American empire dies with it. He needs a different approach, and to his credit, he identifies the correct one. Soldiers, he concludes, make terrible colonists. They don't farm, they don't build, they don't invest in the land because they don't intend to stay. What Virginia needs is not a garrison but a community. People who have a personal permanent stake in the success of the settlement. People who will plant crops because their children need to eat. People who will build houses because their families need shelter. People who will treat the land as home because they have nowhere else to go. He recruits 115 colonists, men, women, and children, 17 women, 9 children. The rest are men, mostly tradesmen and laborers, blacksmiths who will forge nails and hinges, carpenters who will cut timber and raise walls, coopers who will make the barrels for storing food and water, masons who will build hearths and chimneys, farmers who will clear the ancient forest and plant the crops that will determine whether the colony lives or dies. These are not adventurers. They are not the kind of people who appear in history books. They are the quiet, working backbone of an English town, transplanted across an ocean. A tailor named Thomas Topan, a gentleman named Dionys Harvey, travelling with his wife Marjorie, John Sampson and his family, George Howe, a colonist who will be dead within a week of landing. The names on the manifest are ordinary English names, the kind of names you would find in any parish register, in any market town in the country, and most of them will be forgotten by history, remembered only as a number, part of the 115, a statistic in a mystery. The women are worth thinking about specifically because their presence changes everything about this expedition. 17 women agree to cross the Atlantic with their husbands and their children. 17 women who know, from the reports of the returning soldiers, that the previous colony ended in starvation and violence. 17 women who know they are going to a place where one Englishman has already been killed and a native chief has been decapitated. They go anyway. They go because the promise of 500 acres and a new life is powerful enough to outweigh the fear, or because their husbands are going and they will not be left behind, or because the life they have in England, the poverty, the servitude, the ceiling that will never lift, is its own kind of danger, slower and quieter than the wilderness, but just as fatal. The children are the hardest to think about. 9 of them, ranging in age from infants to teenagers. They do not choose this voyage. They are brought. They are passengers in their parents' gamble, small bodies carried across an ocean by adults who are betting everything on a promise made by a man, Raleigh, who has never set foot in the place he is sending them. The incentive is land. 500 acres per settler. In England, where land ownership defines social class, and most of these people will never own so much as a garden, 500 acres is a transformation. It is the promise of a life that would be impossible in the old world. A farm. Independence. Something to leave your children. For people trapped at the bottom of the rigid English class system, it is worth the risk of a 3,000-mile voyage into the unknown. To lead this new colony, Raleigh appoints a man who is the opposite of Ralph Lane in almost every respect. John White is a gentleman, an artist, and a cartographer. He has been to the New World before, on the earlier expeditions, and he has spent his time there not building forts or demanding food from the natives, but painting. His watercolors of the CROATOAN people are among the most important visual documents from the early age of exploration. He paints their villages, their ceremonies, their daily lives. He paints them with care and with detail and with what appears to be genuine respect. He is a man who looks at the native peoples and sees human beings, not obstacles. But White's connection to this voyage is more than professional. It is the most personal thing in his life. Among the colonists is his daughter, Eleanor. She has married a man named Ananias Dare, a tiler and bricklayer, and when the ships depart England in the spring of 1587, Eleanor is pregnant. John White is not just the governor of a colonial enterprise. He is a father who is bringing his pregnant daughter across the Atlantic to give birth in the wilderness. Every decision he makes, every risk he takes, every sleepless night he endures on the crossing is weighted by the knowledge that his daughter and his unborn grandchild are in his care. He is personally, physically, biologically invested in the survival of this colony in a way that no military governor could ever be. The original plan is to avoid Roanoke entirely. White and Raleigh know the ground is poisoned. The plan is to sail further north, to the Chesapeake Bay, where the land is reportedly better and, more importantly, where the native population has not been brutalized by Ralph Lane's soldiers. Roanoke is to be a brief stop, a place to collect Manteo, who has contacts there, and then move on. The fleet's pilot, a Portuguese navigator named Simon Fernandez, has other ideas. Fernandez is a privateer. He has been making money raiding Spanish ships on the voyage over, and he wants to get back to the Caribbean for more. He has no interest in spending additional weeks sailing up the coast to the Chesapeake. When the fleet reaches Roanoke in late July, Fernandez announces that this is as far as he goes. The colonists will be put ashore here. He will not take them further. White is furious. He argues. He pleads. Fernandez is immovable. The colonists are unloaded onto Roanoke Island, the one place they were never supposed to be, and Fernandez sails away. They are standing on the same beach where Ralph Lane's soldiers stood, the same shore where Aquascogoc was burned, the same coast where Pamisapan's head was paraded through an English fort. They are families, women and children, on ground that remembers what English people do. The first sign that the ground remembers comes within days. The colonists begin the work of rebuilding. The old fort from Lane's time is still standing in disrepair. They repair what they can. They clear ground. They unpack their tools and their supplies and try to establish the rhythms of a functioning settlement. The women organize the living spaces. The men begin cutting timber. The children, the 9 children who have crossed an ocean, explore the edges of the forest, watched by their mothers, who watch the forest too, for different reasons. George Howe is one of the colonists. He is a member of White's governing council, one of the 12 assistants. He is a practical, sensible man, the kind of person who gets things done. On a late July afternoon, a few days after the landing, Howe goes crabbing alone in the shallow waters near the settlement. The Outer Banks are famous for their crabs. The shallows teem with them. It is an ordinary, peaceful activity. A man wading in warm water, bent over, focused on his catch. He is alone. This is the mistake, though it shouldn't have to be. A man should be able to catch crabs without an armed escort. But Howe is English, And this is Roanoke, and the people who live here have not forgotten what English soldiers did to their chief. CROATOAN warriors find him in the shallows. According to White's account, they riddle him with arrows and wade into the water and beat him to death with their war clubs. His body is found later, still in the water, face down, the crabs crawling over him. 16 arrows for a man catching crabs. The violence is not proportional to the act, it is proportional to the debt of Aquascagok, the debt of Pemisapan. Howe is not paying for his own sins, he is paying for Ralph Lane's. The message is delivered not just to Howe's body, but to the colony that finds it. This is what you are to us. This is what English people are. You are not settlers. You are not neighbours. You are the people who burned our village and murdered our chief. And we have not forgotten. The colonists are terrified. They have been on the island for less than a week, and one of their own is dead. The women clutch their children. The men check their weapons and look at the tree line with different eyes. Every shadow between the trunks could be a warrior. Every rustle of leaves could be an arrow. The reality of their situation begins to settle over them like a cold fog. They are not in the new Eden they were promised. They are in a place where people want them dead. But not all the native peoples are hostile. Manteo's CROATOAN people, who live on a separate island to the south, remain friendly. They have a relationship with the English that predates the violence. Manteo himself has spent years in England. He has chosen his side. Shortly after arrival, he is baptized into the Church of England and given the title Lord of Roanoke. He is the colonists' translator, their guide, their only bridge to the native world. Without him, they would be completely blind. White tries to use Manteo to repair the damage Lane left behind. He sends messages to the CROATOAN villages, inviting them to forget and forgive the violence of the previous expedition. The CROATOAN do not respond. The silence is its own answer. There will be no forgiveness. There will be no trade. The colonists are on their own. And then, in the middle of all this fear and isolation, something happens that changes everything, not politically, not strategically, emotionally. On August 18th, 1587, Eleanor Dare gives birth to a healthy baby girl. The birth happens in the rough shelter that serves as the Dare family's home. There is no doctor. There is no midwife trained in the English tradition. There are the other women of the colony, 17 of them, doing what women have always done for each other in small communities at the edges of the world. They attend to Eleanor. They bring water. They hold her hands. They talk her through the hours of labour in a shelter built of green timber, on an island where one of their neighbours was shot full of arrows a week ago. And then the baby arrives, small, loud, alive. The colonists name her Virginia. Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. The name is a tribute to the land, to the Virgin Queen who granted the charter, and to the audacity of the entire enterprise. They have named this baby after a dream. John White holds his granddaughter. He is an artist. He has spent his career observing the world with the precise, attentive eye of a painter. And now he is holding something he cannot paint, something that exists beyond the reach of his brushes and his pigments. A person, a new person, his daughter's daughter. 9 pounds of possibility, screaming at the ceiling of a wooden shelter 3,000 miles from England. In a settlement gripped by fear, surrounded by hostility, running low on supplies, and stranded on the wrong island, this baby is the argument against despair. She is the reason they came. Not gold, not glory, not the strategic ambitions of Sir Walter Raleigh or the geopolitical manoeuvrings of the English crown. This, a child, a new life, a future. A christening is held. The community gathers. The baby is passed from hand to hand. The women coo over her. The men stand back and do what men do in the presence of newborns, which is to look at each other with expressions that are trying very hard not to be emotional and failing completely. For one afternoon, the fear lifts. For one afternoon, Roanoke is not a hostile shore surrounded by people who want them dead. It is a village where a baby has been born, and the village is celebrating. But the christening joy doesn't change the mathematics of survival. The colonists arrive too late to plant crops. Their supplies are dwindling. The native peoples won't trade with them. Winter is coming, and the relief ships that Raleigh promised to send are not here. The colonists hold meetings, tense, frightened meetings in which the reality of their situation is discussed with a frankness that must have been devastating. They need supplies, they need them urgently, and the only way to get them is to send someone back to England to tell Raleigh exactly how desperate things are. Someone has to go. Nobody volunteers. Every man in the colony has staked his future on his 500 acres. Leaving means risking that claim. Leaving means risking never coming back. The Atlantic is vast and dangerous, and ships are lost on it all the time. They turn to White. The logic is sound. He is the governor. He has the authority and the credibility to make the case to Raleigh. He knows the investors. He knows the court. He is the only person in the colony with the political connections to guarantee that the relief mission happens. The logic is also agonizing. His daughter has just given birth. His granddaughter is 9 days old. He is being asked to leave them here, on a hostile shore, with dwindling food, surrounded by people who want them dead, and sail 3,000 miles across an ocean with no guarantee that he will ever make it back. He refuses, he argues, he begs them to send someone else. He points out, with the desperation of a man grasping for any alternative, that if he leaves, the colony will be without its governor, without its most experienced administrator, without the one person who has been to the New World before and understands its dangers. He tells them to send one of the assistants. He tells them to send two. He tells them to draw lots. The colonists are immovable. They present him with a formal written statement, signed by the full body of assistants, requesting, essentially demanding, that he return to England. The document is a remarkable artifact. It is simultaneously a plea for help and a release of liability, an acknowledgement that they are asking their governor to do something he does not want to do, and that they will hold no grudge if the voyage goes badly. White reads the statement. He looks at his daughter. He looks at his granddaughter, who is 9 days old. He looks at the faces of 113 people who are telling him that their survival depends on his leaving the two people he loves most in the world. He agrees. The preparations for departure take a few days. White packs what he needs. He gathers letters from the colonists, messages for their families in England, documents requesting specific supplies. He reviews the agreement about the carved messages. If you move, carve the destination. If you're in danger, add a cross. On the morning of his departure, sometime in late August 1587, John White walks to the shore. His daughter is there. His granddaughter, not yet 2 weeks old, is in Eleanor's arms. Around them, the colonists have gathered to see him off. These are people who have bet their lives on this man's ability to cross an ocean and come back with help. They are watching their last connection to England walk toward a boat. We have no record of what White said to his daughter, no record of what Eleanor said to her father. The private words of a family being separated by 3,000 miles of ocean in the 16th century are lost to history, as private words almost always are. But we can know what the moment meant. A father holding a baby he may never see again. A daughter watching her father walk away. The understanding, unspoken between them, that the ocean is vast and ships are lost and promises made on beaches are not always kept. White boards the ship. The ship sails east. The figures on the shore grow smaller. The island disappears behind the curve of the horizon. He will not see any of them again. Chapter 3. The Man Who Couldn't Get Back. John White sailed for England expecting to return within months. He would be gone for 3 years, and the reason he couldn't get back is one of the cruelest coincidences in history, because the moment he arrived in England, the entire country went to war. White's crossing is brutal. Autumn storms batter the ship. The vessel is small and underpowered, designed for coastal work, not an Atlantic crossing in storm season. The crew is undermanned. Food and water run short within weeks. White, who is not a young man, and who has already endured a full crossing earlier in the year, spends the voyage sick, sleepless, and consumed by a single, relentless thought. His daughter is behind him, and every mile the ship travels is a mile further from her. The crossing takes weeks longer than it should. Storms push the ship off course. Headwinds slow progress to a crawl. There are days when the ship makes no forward distance at all, sitting becalmed on a grey, featureless ocean, while White paces the deck and stares west at the horizon, as if he could see across 3,000 miles of water to the island where his family is waiting. When he finally reaches England, in the autumn of 1587, he is exhausted, sick, and desperate, but he is alive, and he has one purpose: get supplies, get ships, and get back to Roanoke before winter kills his colony. He goes directly to Raleigh. He describes the situation with the urgency it deserves. The colonists are stranded on the wrong island. Their food is running out. The native peoples are hostile. One man is already dead. They need supplies immediately. They need them now. Raleigh listens. He agrees. He begins assembling a relief expedition. Ships are prepared. Supplies are gathered. A departure date is set for the spring of 1588. And then the Spanish Armada happens. King Philip II of Spain has been building an invasion fleet for years. 130 ships, 30,000 men, the largest naval force ever assembled in European history. Its purpose is to cross the English Channel, land an army in England, overthrow Queen Elizabeth, and restore the Catholic faith by force. The Armada is not a threat. It is an extinction event. If it succeeds, England ceases to exist as an independent nation. Queen Elizabeth and her council respond with total mobilization. Every able-bodied ship in England is commandeered for the defense of the realm. Every sailor, every captain, every barrel of gunpowder is requisitioned. A royal order goes out to every port in the kingdom. No ships may leave English waters. The stay of shipping is absolute. Raleigh's relief ships are seized. His sailors are conscripted. The supplies he has gathered for Roanoke are redirected to the war effort. The entire apparatus of rescue that White has been building collapses overnight. White is frantic. He petitions, he writes letters, he begs. Nobody's listening. The country is facing annihilation. 115 colonists on an island 3,000 miles away are, in the calculus of national survival, invisible. They are a rounding error in a war that will determine the fate of civilization. Nobody cares. White can hear the clock. Every day that passes without a relief ship is another day. His daughter is alone. Another day, his granddaughter is growing up without him. Another day, the food supply is shrinking. Another day, the hostile tribes are watching the settlement, remembering what the English did, waiting. In the spring of 1588, the spring he promised to return, White makes a desperate attempt. He manages to acquire 2 tiny ships, pinnaces, named the Brave and the Roe. They are too small for the Royal Navy to bother confiscating. He loads them with what supplies he can scrounge and sets sail for Virginia. The Brave and the Roe are absurdly small for an Atlantic crossing. They are coastal vessels, designed for short journeys in sheltered waters, not for the open ocean. White knows this. He doesn't care. Any ship is better than no ship. Any chance is better than none. It is a doomed voyage from the first hour. The crews he has hired are not colonists or naval officers. They are privateers. They are in it for profit, and a humanitarian supply run to a struggling colony on the far side of the Atlantic is not profitable. The prospect of intercepting a Spanish merchant vessel loaded with silver and spices is far more appealing than delivering barrels of flour to a settlement that might not even exist anymore. Instead of sailing west toward Roanoke, the ships turn south toward the shipping lanes, hunting for Spanish prizes. White, the governor of a starving colony, is a passenger on a pirate ship, watching his rescue mission be hijacked by men who care more about Spanish gold than English babies. It gets worse. The Brave encounters a French privateer. There is a fight. The French ship is larger, better armed, and crewed by men who are better at this particular kind of violence. The battle is short and brutal. The Brave is boarded. The French stripped the ship of everything of value, including every last provision intended for Roanoke: the food, the tools, the seeds, the medicines, everything White spent months gathering, everything that was supposed to keep his colony alive, is taken by French pirates and dispersed into the anonymous economy of Atlantic piracy. White himself is wounded in the fighting, cut by a blade, or struck by debris. The Brave and the Roe limp back to an English port, battered, looted, and having accomplished nothing. White's second attempt to reach his family has ended in humiliation and blood. The relief mission has failed completely. The supplies are gone. The ships are damaged. White is injured and penniless. He has nothing left except his desperation. The summer of 1588 brings the Armada. For 9 days in July, the fate of England hangs in the balance as the English fleet engages the massive Spanish formation in the English Channel. Fire ships are sent into the anchored Spanish fleet at Calais. The formation breaks. A providential storm, the Protestant wind, scatters the Spanish ships along the coasts of Scotland and Ireland, where many are wrecked. England survives. The nation celebrates. It is one of the most famous military victories in history. John White does not celebrate. The nation has been saved, but his family has not. The war with Spain continues on the seas. Ships are still commandeered. Sailors are still conscripted. The blockade on civilian shipping is loosened but not lifted. The Atlantic remains a war zone. 1,589 passes. No ship. White spends the year in a hell of bureaucratic frustration. He writes letters to everyone he can think of. He petitions Raleigh, who is sympathetic, but whose own influence at court is waning. Raleigh is distracted. His relationship with the Queen has been damaged by a secret marriage, and his attention is divided between Virginia, his Irish estates, and his increasingly desperate attempts to stay in the Queen's favour. The colony that was supposed to make his fortune and his name has become an expensive embarrassment. White approaches other investors, other ship owners, other captains. Everyone has an excuse. The war, the cost, the risk, the fact that the colony is probably already dead. Why spend a fortune rescuing corpses? The logic is sound, and it is monstrous, and White can do nothing to argue against it, except the truth, which is that he doesn't know they are dead, that they might be alive, that his daughter and his granddaughter might be alive, and that the only way to find out is to go. Nobody funds the voyage. He thinks about his daughter every day. He thinks about the agreement they made, the system of carved messages. He imagines Eleanor's face as the months pass and no sail appears on the horizon. Does she stand on the beach each morning and look east? Does she still believe he is coming? Or has she stopped looking? Has she accepted that the ship is not coming, that her father is not coming, that England has forgotten them? He imagines Virginia, his granddaughter. She is walking now, she is talking, she is learning words, though whether they are English words or CROATOAN words or some mixture of both, he cannot know. She is growing up in a world he was supposed to protect, surrounded by dangers he was supposed to shield her from. Every day she grows older is a day she grows further from the grandfather she has never known. He imagines the colonists rationing their food. He imagines the meetings, the arguments, the slow erosion of hope. He imagines the moment when they look at each other and say the thing that nobody wants to say. He is not coming back. And then the decision. What do we do now? White cannot know any of this. He can only imagine it. And the imagining is its own kind of torture. 1,590, 3 years after his departure. White finally secures passage to Virginia, but not on a relief ship. There is no relief ship. There will never be a relief ship, not the way he imagined it, with holds full of grain and tools and medicines. Instead, he talks his way onto a fleet of privateering ships heading for the Caribbean. The fleet is owned by a merchant named John Watts, and its purpose is profit, not rescue. The captains agree to make a stop at Roanoke, but only as a detour. White is a passenger, not a commander. He has no authority over the route, the schedule, or the priorities of the voyage. The fleet sails in March. For the next 5 months, White endures the same nightmare as before. The ships spend weeks in the Caribbean, raiding Spanish settlements, chasing prizes, engaging in the routine violence of Elizabethan piracy. Men are killed, ships are damaged, treasure is taken, and all of it, every battle, every delay, every storm-tossed night at anchor in a Caribbean harbour, is time that White is not at Roanoke. He has no power. He cannot order the captains to change course. He cannot demand that they abandon their profitable enterprise for his personal mission. He is a passenger, a tolerated presence on someone else's ship, his rescue mission a footnote in a business trip. White watches the days pass. He has been counting since August 1587. Every day has a number. Every number is a failure. Over 1,000 days since he held Virginia, since he saw Eleanor, since he stood on the beach and promised to come back. In mid-August, the fleet finally approaches the coast of Virginia. They have been at sea for 5 months. White has been away from his colony for 3 years. On the evening of August 17th, they anchor off the Outer Banks. Roanoke Island is visible in the distance, and from somewhere on the island, White sees something that makes his heart stop. Smoke, a plume of smoke rising above the trees, near where the settlement should be. Smoke means fire. Fire means people. His colonists are alive. They have survived. 3 years of agony, 3 years of failure, 3 years of promises broken, and ships commandeered, and voyages hijacked, and they are alive. The smoke is proof. He can see it. The seas are too rough for an immediate landing. They have to wait until morning, but they cannot contain their excitement. As darkness falls, the sailors fire cannons toward the island. They blow trumpets. They play English songs, familiar tunes that would carry across the water and through the trees and into the ears of any English person listening. We are here. We have come. Your wait is over. They play and they call out into the darkness, and they listen. The island sends back nothing. No cannon, no trumpet, no voice, no light, no answering signal of any kind, just the wind and the waves and the long black silence of the shore. Chapter 4. The Empty Shore. The morning of August 18th, 1590, Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday. A grandfather finally reaches the shore he has been trying to reach for 3 years, and what he finds there will haunt him for the rest of his life. The morning breaks grey and stormy. The seas are still rough. The landing party prepares 2 boats. The surf is violent. One of the boats nearly capsizes. 7 men are thrown into the water. Some cannot swim. The sailors on the larger ships debate whether to abort the landing. White will not hear of it. He has waited 3 years. He is going ashore. They land on the beach. The sand is empty. There are no footprints except their own. White organizes the party, and they begin walking toward the settlement on the north end of the island. The path is overgrown. Brush and saplings have reclaimed what was once a cleared trail. Nobody has walked this path in a long time. As they move through the trees, they find something, carved into the bark of a tree at the edge of a clearing, 3 letters. CRO. 3 letters, the beginning of a word, cut into the bark with a blade, deliberately, clearly, not scratched by an animal, not random damage. Someone carved these letters into this tree, and they did not finish. White stares at the letters. His mind is racing. CRO. The beginning of what? A name? A message? A word carved in haste by someone who was interrupted before they could complete it. He presses on. The party continues toward the settlement. The silence deepens. There are no sounds of human habitation, no chopping of wood, no clang of metal, no voices. The only sounds are the wind in the canopy and the distant crash of the surf. They reach the settlement, and they find nothing. The houses are gone, not destroyed, not burned, dismantled. The timbers have been removed. The structures have been taken apart methodically, carefully, the way a builder takes apart a structure when he intends to use the material somewhere else. Whoever did this was not in a panic. They were not fleeing for their lives. They were packing. The entire settlement has been enclosed by a palisade, a defensive wall of thick, upright logs that was not there when White left 3 years ago. The colonists built this wall at some point after his departure. They felt threatened enough to fortify their position. The palisade is substantial, the logs driven deep into the ground. This was not a casual project. It was the work of people who expected to be attacked. Inside the palisade, the ground is overgrown with weeds and tall grass. Melons are growing wild in the untended plots, the seeds from some earlier planting having survived and sprouted without human care. Scattered around the enclosure are a few heavy objects, things too cumbersome to carry on a journey. Iron bars, some pieces of equipment, the kind of things you leave behind when you're taking only what you can carry. Wyatt searches for his personal belongings. Before he left, he had buried several chests containing his most precious possessions, the things he could not carry on the voyage but could not bear to lose. His paintings, the watercolors of the New World that he had spent years creating, some of the only visual records of the native peoples and their way of life. His books, his maps, his armor, his letters, the physical record of his work and his life in Virginia, buried in the earth for safekeeping. He finds the site where the chests were buried. They have been dug up. Someone, at some point in the 3 years since his departure, found the burial site and excavated the chests. The contents are scattered on the ground, ruined by years of exposure to rain and salt air and the slow, patient destruction of the climate. His paintings, the beautiful watercolors that represented years of careful observation, the images of villages and ceremonies and faces that no European had ever recorded before, are destroyed. Pulp, unreadable smears of pigment on disintegrating paper. His books are rotted, his maps are gone, his armor is rusted and scattered. This is a small loss compared to the loss of 115 people, but for Wyatt, it must have been a peculiar agony. These paintings were his contribution to history. They were the proof that he had been here, that he had seen this world, that he had understood it. And they are gone, destroyed not by violence, but by neglect, by the simple passage of time in a place where nobody was left to protect them. He searches the rest of the enclosure. He finds iron bars, lead shot, heavy equipment, the things you leave behind when you are packing for a journey and can only carry what you can lift. He finds no personal items, no clothing, no cooking utensils, no children's belongings. The colonists took everything that mattered and left everything that was too heavy. But there are no bodies, no bones, no skulls, no graves, no signs of violence, no bloodstains on the ground, no arrowheads embedded in the palisade logs, no burned timbers, no evidence of a battle. The settlement has not been destroyed. It has been emptied. Whoever left, left alive. And then Wyatt sees the post. At the entrance to the palisade, on a prominent post, carved in clear capital letters, a single word, CROATOAN. Wyatt reads the word. He reads it again. And according to his own written account of the discovery, he is greatly joyed. He is not confused by this word. He does not treat it as a mystery. He treats it as a message, because that is exactly what it is. It is the system they agreed on before he left. If you move, carve the name of your destination. If you are in distress, carve a cross above the name. Wyatt looks above the letters. There is no cross, no mark of any kind above the word CROATOAN. The message as Wyatt reads it is unambiguous. The colonists have moved to CROATOAN. They have moved peacefully, without distress, to the island where Manteo's people live. They are alive. They are safe. They are 50 miles to the south. CROATOAN is what is now called Hatteras Island. It is the home of the CROATOAN tribe, Manteo's people, the one native group that has been consistently friendly to the English from the very first contact in 1584. If the colonists, facing starvation and hostility from the CROATOAN tribes, needed to find refuge, the CROATOAN are the only people on the entire coast who would take them in. The logic is clear. The evidence is clear. Wyatt's own emotional reaction, his joy at finding the word, is recorded in his own hand. For him, in this moment, the mystery is solved. His family is alive. They are with Manteo. He just needs to sail 50 miles south and he will find them. He orders the ships to prepare to sail for CROATOAN, and then the weather turns. The storm that has been threatening all day descends in full force. The wind builds, the seas rise, the ships at anchor begin to drag. One of the anchor cables snaps. The ships are in danger of being driven onto the shore. The sailors, who have been tolerating White's mission as a minor detour in their profitable privateering voyage, make a decision. They are leaving. Now. White argues. He begs. He rages. The captains are immovable. They have nearly lost their ships. The weather is worsening. They have spent months in the Caribbean accumulating treasure, and they are not going to risk all of it, and their lives, for a 50-mile detour to retrieve the governor's relatives from a native village. The fleet sails, not south to CROATOAN, east, toward the open Atlantic, toward England. John White stands on the deck as Roanoke Island disappears behind him. For the second time in 3 years, he watches the shore where his daughter and his granddaughter are, the shore he has spent 1,000 days trying to reach, shrink into the distance and vanish. He has been so close. The answer was carved into a post. His family is alive, 50 miles away, and he is being carried in the wrong direction by men who do not care. He will never return. He will spend the remaining years of his life in England, and later in Ireland. He will write letters. He will make plans. He will talk about Roanoke with anyone who will listen. But he will never again set foot on a ship bound for Virginia. He will never find out whether his daughter survived. He will never know whether his granddaughter grew up. He will die without knowing, the promise he made on that beach in 1587, forever unkept. In one of his last known writings, White reflects on the fate of his colony. He commits their future to the merciful help of the Almighty, whom I most humbly beseech to help and comfort them. It is the prayer of a man who has exhausted every earthly option and has nothing left except God and hope. And then John White, the artist, the grandfather, the governor who couldn't get back, disappears from the historical record as completely as his colonists disappeared from Roanoke Island. He never found them, but that does not mean they were never found, because 17 years later, new English settlers would arrive in Virginia, and the stories they heard from the native peoples would change everything. Chapter 5. What happened to them? The trail went cold in 1590. It stayed cold for over 400 years, but the colonists left more traces than just a word on a post. And when you follow those traces, the story that emerges is not the ghost story you were told. It's something stranger, and depending on which evidence you trust, it's either far more hopeful or far more brutal than you expect. Let's start with what we know. We know the colonists were alive when they left Roanoke. The settlement was dismantled, not destroyed. The houses were taken apart for their materials. Heavy items were left behind. Personal belongings were packed. This is not the aftermath of a massacre. This is the aftermath of a move. An organized, deliberate relocation by people who expected to need their building materials at their destination. We know they intended to go to CROATOAN. The carving says so. The prearranged code says so. John White's own interpretation, written in his own hand, says so. And the absence of the distress cross above the carving says they were not in immediate danger when they left. We know the CROATOAN people, Manteo's tribe, were the only native group on the coast that had maintained a friendly relationship with the English throughout the entire disastrous colonial enterprise. If the colonists needed allies, the CROATOAN were the only option. We know they were facing starvation. They had arrived too late to plant crops. The CROATOAN refused to trade. Their supplies were running out, and the relief ships from England were not coming. So the most logical reading of the evidence is this: the colonists, abandoned by John White, abandoned by Raleigh, abandoned by England, made the only rational decision available to them. They packed up their settlement, dismantled their buildings, and moved south to CROATOAN Island, now known as Hatteras Island, to live with the one group of people who would take them in. And then, over months and years, As it became clear that no English ship was coming, they did what any group of people would do in their situation. They adapted. They learned to farm the way the CROATOAN farmed. They learned to fish the way the CROATOAN fished. They learned the language. They married into the tribe. They had children. Their English identity, maintained for a few years out of habit and hope, slowly dissolved into the culture that had saved them. They did not vanish. They were absorbed. This is the theory of assimilation, and the evidence for it extends far beyond the carving on the post. Nearly 20 years after the colony's disappearance, in 1607, a new group of English settlers arrived in Virginia, 200 miles to the north. They built a settlement at a place called Jamestown, and as the Jamestown colonists began to explore their surroundings and negotiate with the local tribes, they started to hear stories. Captain John Smith, the leader of the Jamestown colony, recorded accounts from the native peoples about a group of Europeans living to the south. The stories were specific. They described people who lived in two-story houses built with stone walls, a construction technique completely alien to the native population, but utterly standard for English builders. They described people with features that did not match any native group in the region: fair skin, light hair, and grey eyes. Smith was intrigued enough to draw a map. On that map, he marked a location on the mainland, inland from Roanoke, and wrote, "Here remaineth 4 men, clothed that came from Roanoke to Okanahonan." 4 men, clothed in European fashion, living among the natives, years after the colony disappeared. William Strachey, the secretary of the Jamestown colony, recorded similar accounts. He wrote of native people who lived in houses built in the English style, who used copper tools, and who were described by the local tribes as being descendants of people who came from a place to the south. The details are too specific to dismiss as rumor. These are not vague stories about ghosts or spirits. They are descriptions of living people with English customs and European features, reported by multiple independent native sources to multiple English officials over a period of years. The Jamestown colonists made plans to search for these survivors. Multiple expeditions were proposed. Smith himself argued passionately that finding the Roanoke colonists was a moral obligation, that these were English men and women and children who had been abandoned by their own country and who might still be alive 20 years later, waiting for someone to come for them. The search was personal for Smith. He understood abandonment. He understood survival. He understood what it meant to be left in a hostile land with no certainty that help would ever arrive. But Jamestown was itself a colony in constant crisis. The winter of 1609 to 1610, the starving time, would reduce the Jamestown settlement from over 300 colonists to roughly 60. They were struggling with starvation, disease, and their own fraught relationships with Powhatan's Confederacy. The searches for the Roanoke survivors were delayed, rerouted, or abandoned. One expedition, led by a man named Michael Sycamore, was sent south toward the Roanoke area and was never heard from again. Another search party returned, having found nothing. The Roanoke survivors, if they existed, were always just beyond the reach of the people looking for them. By the time the English were stable enough to mount a serious, dedicated expedition to the south, decades had passed. The first generation of survivors would have been old or dead. Their children, raised in native communities, speaking native languages, would have been culturally indistinguishable from their neighbors. The trail, already faint, had gone cold. In recent decades, archaeology has started to find what the historical record couldn't. In 2012, researchers at the British Museum re-examined John White's own map of the Virginia coast and discovered something hidden in plain sight. A small patch of paper had been glued over a section of the drawing. When they analyzed it with X-ray imaging, they found a symbol underneath, a 4-pointed star marking a location on the mainland, roughly 50 miles inland from Roanoke. Someone, possibly White himself, had marked a secondary location and then covered it up. The site, now known as Site X, has yielded 16th century English artifacts from subsequent archaeological digs. On Hatteras Island, the old CROATOAN, archaeologists have found even more. English pottery, a rapier hill, a slate writing tablet, all found at a native village site dating to the late 16th century, and all found intermixed with native artifacts, not in a separate English layer, but blended together. English goods being used in a native household, the archaeological footprint of two cultures that have merged. But there is a much later thread of evidence that picks up where the archaeology leaves off, and it is the detail from this story that I cannot stop thinking about. In 1701, over a century after the colony's disappearance, an English explorer named John Lawson travelled through the interior of North Carolina. On Hatteras Island, the old CROATOAN, he encountered a native community that stopped him in his tracks. These people, he wrote, told him that several of their ancestors were white people. They said the English had been among them for generations. Lawson noted that some of them had grey eyes. And then there are the Lumbee. The Lumbee are a large Native American tribe in North Carolina, over 50,000 strong, concentrated in Robeson County. They have a deeply held oral tradition that their ancestors include the survivors of the Lost Colony. This is not treated as legend within the community, it is treated as family history. When early European surveyors encountered the Lumbee in the 18th century, they noted two things that surprised them. First, these native people spoke an archaic form of English, using words and grammatical structures that had been common in Elizabethan England, but had fallen out of use in Britain generations earlier. Second, some of them had distinctly European features, light eyes, fair skin, lighter hair, and then there are the names. A survey of the Lumbee tribal roll reveals dozens of surnames identical to those on the 1587 Manifest of Colonists. Dare, Cooper, Stevens, Martin, Sampson, Berry, Harvey. English names in a Native American community carried forward through 4 centuries. The connection is debated. Some historians argue the names entered through later colonial contact, not through the Roanoke survivors specifically. The question may never be definitively resolved, but the names are there, stubborn, specific, matching a manifest written in 1587, appearing on a tribal roll 400 years later. The cumulative weight of the evidence, from the CROATOAN carving to the Jamestown reports, to Lawson's grey-eyed islanders, to the archaeology, to the Lumbee surnames, points in one direction. The colonists survived, not as a preserved English community, maintaining their customs and their identity in the wilderness like a time capsule. They survived the way any small group survives when it is cut off from its homeland and surrounded by a larger, established culture. They joined it. They became part of it. They let go of the world they came from and became part of the world they found. The lost colony was never lost. It was transformed, but that is only one reading of the evidence, because there is another story, a darker one, told not by the descendants of survivors, but by the man who may have ordered their destruction. Chapter 6. The Confession. There is another version of what happened to the colonists. It does not end with assimilation. It does not end with survival. It ends with a massacre. And the man who claimed responsibility was one of the most powerful leaders in North America. Chief Powhatan ruled a confederacy of approximately 30 tribes across what is now eastern Virginia. He was a political and military genius, a man who had spent decades building a network of alliances and vassalages that gave him control over thousands of people and vast stretches of territory. He was not a chief, he was an emperor, and when the English arrived at Jamestown in 1607, he was already an old man, accustomed to power, skilled at maintaining it, and ruthless when he needed to be. The Jamestown colonists, from their earliest interactions with Powhatan, asked about the people who had come before them. The English at Roanoke, the colonists who had disappeared. Powhatan knew about them, and in the early years of the Jamestown settlement, he told the English what he knew, or what he wanted them to believe. William Strachey, the Secretary of Jamestown, recorded Powhatan's account. According to Strachey, Powhatan told the English that the Roanoke colonists had not gone south to CROATOAN. They had gone inland, to the west and north, seeking refuge with the Chesapeake tribe, a coastal people who lived near the mouth of the Great Bay that would eventually bear their name. The Chesapeake were not part of Powhatan's confederacy. They were independent, and they had taken the English in. For years, Powhatan said, the English survivors lived among the Chesapeake. They built houses in the English style. They farmed. They raised children. They existed as a small, absorbed community within the larger native society, maintaining some of their customs, their building techniques, their tools, while adopting the language and the rhythms of the people who had taken them in. For nearly 2 decades, they lived in this hybrid state, neither fully English nor fully native, a small, quiet community on the edge of the Great Bay. And then Powhatan's priests received a prophecy. From the Chesapeake Bay, they said, a nation would rise that would threaten and eventually destroy Powhatan's empire. The prophecy was not specific. It did not name the English. It did not describe white-skinned people or European ships. It simply said, from the bay, destruction will come. But Powhatan, looking at the English settlers living among the Chesapeake, saw the fulfillment of the prophecy taking shape. He knew what the English were. He had heard the stories of their ships, their weapons, their insatiable appetite for land. He had seen, in the small community living among the Chesapeake, the seed of something that could grow beyond his control. 12 English families today, 100 tomorrow, 1,000 in a generation, and behind them, across the ocean, the vast and hungry civilization that had sent them. The prophecy gave him the justification. His own strategic instinct gave him the timing. He attacked just before the new English arrived at Jamestown, perhaps because he sensed, through his network of scouts and informants, that more ships were coming. He wanted the problem eliminated before it multiplied. According to his own account, as relayed by Strachey, the attack was total. The Chesapeake were destroyed as an independent people. Their villages were burned. Their warriors were killed. And the English survivors, the remnants of the Lost Colony, were slaughtered alongside them. Men, women, and children. The community that had survived for 20 years through adaptation and goodwill was annihilated in a single military operation. As proof, Powhatan showed the Jamestown English several objects, metal tools, a musket barrel, a small brass mortar used for grinding, items of clearly European manufacture that he claimed had been taken from the bodies of the English dead. He showed them these objects the way a man shows a warning. This is a direct confession of genocide from the most powerful native leader in the region. It is specific, it names the victims, it provides a motive, the prophecy, it offers physical evidence, the English tools, and it comes from a man who had no obvious reason to fabricate a story about destroying a group of English settlers while simultaneously negotiating with a new group of English settlers at Jamestown. Or did he? Because the confession, examined more carefully, is not as straightforward as it appears. Powhatan told this story to the Jamestown English at a time when the relationship between his confederacy and the new colony was tense and volatile. The English at Jamestown were demanding food, expanding their territory, and behaving with the same combination of arrogance and desperation that had characterized the Roanoke enterprise. Powhatan may have been sending a message, not a confession, but a threat. I destroyed the last group of English who came here. I can destroy you too. The confession may have been a strategic lie, a calculated piece of intimidation designed to keep the Jamestown colonists in their place. Powhatan was, by every account, a master of political manipulation. He understood the power of narrative. He understood that a story about the annihilation of the previous English colony would make the current English colonists much more cautious, much more deferential, much more willing to trade on his terms. There is also the question of timing. The attack Powhatan described, according to Strachey, occurred at approximately the same time as the English arrived at Jamestown, roughly 1607. This is 20 years after the colonists were left on Roanoke. If the colonists had survived for 2 decades among the Chesapeake, why would Powhatan suddenly attack them? The prophecy explanation is convenient, but it may also be a justification, added after the fact. And then there is the fundamental problem of the carving. If the colonists went inland to the Chesapeake, who carved CROATOAN on the post at Roanoke, and why? One possibility is that the colony split. This is perhaps the most plausible reading of all the available evidence, and it reconciles the seemingly contradictory threads. The majority of the colonists, the families with children, the elderly, the most vulnerable, follow the original plan. They go south to CROATOAN, to Manteo's people, to safety. They carve the message. They take the building materials. They leave in an orderly fashion. A smaller group, perhaps the younger men, the more adventurous, the ones who still believe in the original mission, goes in the other direction. They head inland, toward the Chesapeake Bay, the colony's intended destination, before Fernandez forced them onto Roanoke. They are looking for the deep water harbor, the fertile land, the place Raleigh originally wanted them to be. This smaller group reaches the Chesapeake. They are taken in. They live among the local tribe for years, perhaps decades, and then Powhatan destroys them. The main group, the families on CROATOAN, survives. They assimilate. Their descendants become the grey-eyed people John Lawson met on Hatteras Island in 1701. Their names, Dare and Cooper and Stevens, appear on the Lumbee tribal roll 3 centuries later. 2 fates, 1 colony, split by a decision made on a beach over 400 years ago. This reading is not provable. No reading of Roanoke is provable. The evidence is too fragmentary, the silence too deep, the gap between 1587 and the present too vast to be bridged with certainty. But it is the reading that accounts for everything: the carving, the dismantled settlement, the Jamestown reports of European-featured natives, Powhatan's confession, the Lumbee names, John Lawson's grey eyes. Before we leave the theories, there is one more thing worth addressing. Because the Roanoke mystery, like all great unsolved mysteries, has attracted its share of fraud. In 1937, a man claimed to have found a large stone inscribed with a message from Eleanor Dare herself. The inscription told a dramatic and heartbreaking story. The colony had been attacked, Ananias and Virginia were dead, and Eleanor had been left alone among the natives. The stone was presented as the definitive answer to the mystery. It caused a national sensation. Then more stones appeared, over 40 of them, all discovered by the same man and his associates, all conveniently appearing after a university offered a cash reward for additional findings. The stones told an increasingly elaborate and fantastical tale of Eleanor's wanderings through the American wilderness. Historians were skeptical from the beginning. The language on the stones was wrong, full of anachronisms, words and spellings that did not exist in Elizabethan English. The carvings were too clean, too uniform, suggesting modern steel tools rather than the crude implements a desperate colonist would have used. And the fact that the same man kept finding stone after stone after stone, always just in time to collect the reward, strained credulity beyond the breaking point. A 1941 investigation by the Saturday Evening Post exposed the Dare stones as a hoax. The academic consensus has held ever since. They are forgeries, clever, elaborate, and for a time convincing, but ultimately fake. The Dare stones are worth mentioning not for their content, but for what they represent. The human need for an answer, the desire to fill the silence with a story, any story, even a fabricated one. The Roanoke mystery has endured for over 4 centuries precisely because it resists a clean resolution. The silence is uncomfortable, the ambiguity is painful, and the temptation to manufacture certainty, to produce a neat ending for a story that has no ending, is powerful enough to make people carve lies into rocks and call them history. The truth, as best we can reconstruct it, is messier and quieter than any hoax or ghost story. 115 people were left on a hostile shore. Their governor couldn't get back. Their country forgot about them, and they did what people do when they are abandoned. They survived, by whatever means were available, by joining the one community that would have them, by letting go of who they were and becoming part of where they were. Some of them may have died, some of them may have been killed, some of them may have tried to sail home and were lost in the Atlantic, but some of them, the evidence suggests, lived. They lived on CROATOAN, and they lived among the Chesapeake, and their descendants carried English names and grey eyes into the centuries that followed, long after the word Roanoke had become synonymous with disappearance. They were never lost. They were abandoned, and when nobody came for them, they saved themselves.
There's a tribal roll in North Carolina. The Lumbee people, over 50,000 names, and scattered through that roll like seeds from planting that happened 400 years ago, there are names that match the 1587 manifest of the Roanoke colonists. Dare, Cooper, Stevens, Sampson, Berry, English names in a Native American community carried forward through 4 centuries of marriages and births and deaths, throughout a history that nobody wrote down because nobody thought to ask. The Lost Colony was never lost. They were abandoned, and when nobody came back for them, they did the only thing they could. They let go of the world that had forgotten them, and they became part of the world that took them in. Their names survived, even when nobody knew where to look for them. If this story stays with you, subscribe to the Midnight Archives, where we illuminate the dark corners of history, the stories that live beneath the ones we tell ourselves. Until next time, keep the candle lit.